Alright guys, welcome back, and in today's episode, we will be going over the Week 13 game slate and giving my picks for each game. But before we get into our Week 13 predictions, let's do some Week 12 recap. So last week, I realized after I released a video that I forgot to announce my lock of the week, but it was the Niners beating the Panthers, which is correct. However, since it's Thanksgiving week, I want to wish everyone and their families a happy Thanksgiving, and I appreciate you guys' support on this channel. I'm going to be adding another $25 to the giveaway pot at the end of the year. So we're currently up to $125 for the big giveaway at the end of the year. Only a couple people are entered right now. Just make sure you guys like and subscribe and comment on each video. The more times you comment, the better chance you have to win. And at the end of the season, I'll pick my giveaway winner. The giveaway is only going up over time. So just make sure you guys enter that giveaway. In our Week 12 Player of the Week, we had Jahmyr Gibbs versus the Giants. He finished with 15 carries for 219 rushing yards. He also racked in 11 receptions for 45 receiving yards, and he scored 3 total touchdowns and had over 50 fantasy points. If I'm not mistaken, I want to say he scored 55 fantasy points. And man, just an absolute dominant performance, showing why he's a top 5 running back in the league easily, and showing why he was worth a 12th pick in the NFL draft. And then before we get into the games, our Week 13 start of the week for fantasy football, we have Courtland Sutton versus the Washington Commanders. I think he's going to have a big bounce back week. I think he's had a couple lower scoring weeks in fantasy, and I don't think he's been as involved in the offense. And I think the Commanders have a really weak secondary, and I think that he's in a favorable matchup. So my start of the week, I think, is going to be Courtland Sutton versus the Commanders, and we're going to hope he has over 15 points. All right, let's get right into things. We have 3 games on Thanksgiving. Like I said, happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Our first game, 1 o'clock on Thanksgiving, we have the Green Bay Packers versus the Detroit Lions. And if you don't remember, Week 1, I'm pretty sure the Packers beat the Lions in a pretty convincing fashion. But this week around, things I'm looking forward to seeing in this game is if Josh Jacobs is going to play and how much is he going to be involved this week. He's dealing with an injury that he suffered on Week 11. And then also, can the Packers repeat their Week 1 performance against the Lions? Like I said, it was pretty convincingly that the Packers defense looked outstanding Week 1 against the Lions and shut them down. But now over time, the offense is gelled with the new offensive coordinator, and now Dan Campbell's calling the plays. So, the offense got better over time, and I'm interested to see how they look against the Packers defense now. But you can say the same about the Packers. I think their Packers defense has gelled together and got even better than it was at the start. And then going over to Detroit's defense, can they have a better performance than they did last week? I thought that they let Jameis Winston throw the ball all over them, and I thought they didn't play too well or up to their standard against the Giants. And then lastly, can Jared Goff play against a good defense? I feel like at times, no slight to Jared Goff, he just struggles against good defenses at certain times. I think the Packers defense is one of the better defenses in the league. So I'm interested to see how that matchup goes. But we'll take everything into account. I'm taking the Lions to win this Thanksgiving matchup. All right, in our second Thanksgiving matchup, we have the Chiefs versus the Cowboys. Some things I'm looking forward to seeing in this game. Can the Chiefs finally put together a dominant performance this year? I feel like a lot of their games have been one-score games that haven't gone their way, and they haven't really blown out a good team. Not saying the Cowboys are a good team, but I feel like they're an average team, and I think this would be a big statement win if they beat the Cowboys. Then also, can the Chiefs receivers take advantage of a weak Dallas secondary? I think a lot of opposing receivers always do well against Dallas' secondary, and especially now with Rashee Rice being limited at practice yesterday on Monday. Interested to see if he plays, and if not, who's going to step up in that wide receiver room between Hollywood Brown or Xavier Worthy or even Travis Kelce's had a solid season. But I think that they have a favorable matchup against Dallas' secondary. And then going over to Dallas, can Dallas' front seven continue to play well? I feel like after trading for Quinnen Williams, they're way better at stopping the run. And they have that 3-headed defensive tackle trio of Quinnen Williams, Osa Odigizua, and Kenny Clark. And I think they've been stopping the run pretty well. And then can George Pickens continue his dominance? I think the matchup this week is going to be George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb versus Trent McDuffie, with 2 of the top receivers in the league versus one of the better corners in the league. And I think George Pickens is cementing himself as the wide receiver 1 on this team. CeeDee Lamb has had some drop issues recently ever since coming back from his injury. And it looks like Dak Prescott's favoring George Pickens. He's making all the big plays on this team this year. He's on pace for like over 1,500 receiving yards, showing that he's a top 5, top 3 receiver in the league. But with taking everything into account, I like the Chiefs this week, so I'm taking the Chiefs in this Week 13 Thanksgiving matchup. All right, and next up, we have a Thursday night football matchup for Thanksgiving. Our third game, we have the Cincinnati Bengals versus the Baltimore Ravens. And the one thing that, is standing out this week is Joe Burrow is officially back. However, I just saw before I started filming this that T. Higgins is going to be out this week. And same with Trey Hendrickson, if I'm not mistaken. So that's two of their playmakers on both sides of the ball out, which is going to be tough for them. Big news for the Bengals fans. They might be out of the playoffs, but Joe Burrow's finally back, their top quarterback. I'm looking forward to seeing that Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase connection, probably the best quarterback wide receiver duo in the league. And then going over to Cincinnati's defense, can they stop the run and minimize Derrick Henry? Derrick Henry's had a pretty solid season, almost averaging 5 yards per carry, almost had 1,000 rushing yards and 9 touchdowns. I think he's really coming into his own. Scored multiple touchdowns in the past couple weeks. And then going over to the Ravens, can Lamar Jackson get back to playing at MVP Lamar level? I feel like he's not playing 100% or he's injured. I know he's had that toe injury that's been lingering. He's looked decent, but he just hasn't looked like the MVP level Lamar Jackson that we know he can be. So I'm curious after the season if anything's going to come out that he's been playing injured. But no excuses. I'm expecting the best out of them if he's playing. He's obviously healthy enough to be playing. I feel like they're a very beatable team in the AFC this year. And then, like I said, not even Lamar Jackson, but this offense, he's the main point of it. Can this offense get back on track and being a top 5 offense in the league? I think at certain times in games recently, they've looked very stoppable. Their rushing attack isn't as explosive. And the passing attack is honestly better than the rushing attack this year. I think Zay Flowers has been really good and on pace for a 1,000-yard plus season. 58 receptions for 761 receiving yards. Just need to get the touchdowns in. But with taking everything into account, I just feel like the Ravens are a very beatable team. So I'm taking the Bengals in this Week 13 Thanksgiving matchup. All right, and then we have our Black Friday matchup on Friday, obviously. We have the Bears versus the Eagles. Some things I'm looking forward to seeing in this matchup. Will Caleb Williams look impressive against a good Philly defense? I thought he looked pretty solid last week against the Steelers. The Steelers defense fluctuates. One week it's good, the other week it's not. So I'm interested to see how that goes. And then can the Bears impose a good rushing attack with DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monunga against a pretty solid Philly run defense? I think there's a really good chance that Philly is going to be coming in this game looking for vengeance, not just to beat the Bears after their 21-0 lead that they blew against the Cowboys last week. I think they're going to be ready to show up and show that they're still a top team in the NFC. And then, like I said, going over to the Eagles, can they get back on track? And is A.J. Brown going to have another big game? I think the last 2 weeks he's been way more involved in the offense. And it's going to be interesting to see if Jalen Johnson plays. I think that'll be a very good matchup, Jalen Johnson versus A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. And the one way I feel like the Eagles have a good chance of winning this game is if Saquon Barkley can get back to this 2024 ways. Obviously not as dominant of a season he had last year. Definitely a big regression, but I think he's still one of the top running backs in the league. But with taking everything into account, I'm taking the Eagles in this Week 13 matchup. All right, and then our first Sunday matchup, 1 o'clock, we have the Rams versus the Panthers. Some things I'm looking forward to seeing in this matchup. Can the Rams continue their dominant stretch? Big win after big win. Beat the Seahawks, the Buccaneers. And is Matthew Stafford going to be the MVP this season? He's playing at, like I said, an MVP level. And I think that he's pretty much he's done for 30 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Playing like the best quarterback in the league this year. And then going over to the Rams defense, could they put a beating on Bryce Young and embarrass this Carolina's offense? I think Carolina's offense especially yesterday when they played the Niners, I think that they had flashes of being a good offense, but I think Bryce Young could be holding them back, which sucks to say since I like Bryce Young. Can they embarrass them and bury this Panthers offense and make this ugly game for the Panthers and potentially have a blowout game? And then going over to the Panthers, can Ted McMillan and Bryce Young continue their strong connection? I think back-to-back weeks of touchdowns with them. That connection's heating up. 56 receptions for 783 receiving yards. He's playing like one of the best rookie receivers in the league right now. If I want to say maybe he is the best unless I'm forgetting someone, other than maybe Emeka Egbuka. But I think that he's shown that he can be easily a top 10 receiver in the league at some point in his career. And then going over to the Panthers defense, you can J.C. Horn and the Panthers defense will limit Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams. J.C. Horn had a big week last week, intercepting Brock Purdy twice, if I'm not mistaken. And I think that this Panthers defense flashes sometimes of being good. J.C. Horn and this Panthers defense is a tough task of trying to defend an MVP-level quarterback, 2 top 5, top 10 receivers, and a really good running back. So with taking everything into account, this is my lock of the week. I'm taking the Rams in this Week 13 matchup. All right, next up, we have the 49ers versus the Cleveland Browns. Some things I'm looking forward to seeing this matchup. Can the Niners defense repeat the performance against the Carolina Panthers on Monday Night Football? I think their defense played pretty well. Limit Bryce Young. Only allowed 1 passing touchdown. I think only 1 touchdown throughout the whole game. And then also the Niners can CMC continue his historic pace against a pretty good Cleveland Browns defense, especially the run defense. CMC has 81 receptions for a running back. I think I saw a stat that he's on pace for 1 reception shy of his historic season with the Panthers. At the end of the season, he's going to have 1,000 rushing yards, 1,000 receiving yards. He's a do-it-all. He literally is the leader of this offense. No disrespect to Brock Purdy. McCaffrey's the best player on this team. And when he has a good game, you have a good chance of winning that game. And then going over to the Browns, can Shedeur Sanders impress in his second career start? I thought he looked pretty solid in his first career start last week against the Raiders. And he was a fifth-round pick. I think some people's expectations are very high. And I know it's easy to hit on Shedeur Sanders, but I'm interested to see if he's going to be able to show some flashes of being a potential franchise quarterback or just a chance at being a quarterback for the rest of the season. If I'm not mistaken, I saw that Kevin Stefanski announced Shedeur Sanders the starter for the rest of the season. So I like that he's going to have a chance in the last 5 to 6 games and see how he can perform. And then can Myles Garrett continue his historic pace? Him versus Trent Williams is going to be a very good matchup, two of the best at their positions. Myles Garrett's on pace to break the sack record. He has 18 sacks, if I'm not mistaken. He's playing like a defensive player of the year, and he can easily wreck a game. But with taking everything into account, I'm taking the Niners in this Week 13 matchup. All right, next up, we have the Texans versus the Indianapolis Colts. Some things looking forward to seeing this matchup is how is C.J. Stroud going to look in his first game back after his concussion. If I'm not mistaken, it's pretty much confirmed that C.J. Stroud should be back this week. I think he was close to playing last week. And then Davis Mills has stepped in and I think won 3 or 4 games in a row. Put them back into the contention of winning AFC South. They're 2 games back right now. So can they spoil the Indianapolis Colts' chance at running away with this division? The Jaguars, like I mentioned, are 7-4 right there. The only team really out of this division and the playoffs is the Titans. But I'm interested to see how Stroud looks. If he has a good back half of the season, I think they have a good chance at running the table. Or not running the table, but a good chance at competing for the AFC South. This is a very big game for them. And then can this Texans run defense limit Jonathan Taylor? I think the past couple of performances for Jonathan Taylor, he hasn't been as dominant. He's clearly the best running back in the league this year. But I think the Chiefs held him in check, and I think the team before him that he played held him in check pretty well too. This Texans run defense is pretty solid. I'm interested to see if Jonathan Taylor can bust a run or two, have another 100-plus yard performance, or is he going to be limited? And I think when you limit Jonathan Taylor, you have a good chance of beating the Colts. And like I mentioned, going over to the Colts, can Jonathan Taylor come back to his dominance at the beginning of the season? I think he's on pace for 1,500-plus rushing yards pretty easily, maybe 1,600, 1,700. He already has 15 touchdowns. He leads the league in touchdowns. And could very well be the offensive player of the year, him or JSN or even Christian McCaffrey. And then staying on the Colts, can the Colts receivers get open against a tough Houston secondary? I think they have their hands full with Derek Stingley and Kamari Lassiter, one of the better cornerback duos in the league, both still really young in their prime. And the Colts have some good playmakers with Michael Pittman having a very solid season, Tyler Warren, Alec Pierce, Josh Downs. So I'm curious to see how that goes. But with taking everything into account, I'm taking the Colts in this Week 13 matchup. All right, next up we have the New Orleans Saints versus the Miami Dolphins. Some things looking forward to seeing in this matchup specifically is if Alvin Kamara is going to play. And if not, how is Devin Neal going to look with more opportunity? The Saints drafted him this past draft, if I'm not mistaken, rookie. So he's going to have an increased workload. I'm interested to see how he's going to look with the more opportunity. And then for both receivers, can Chris Olave take advantage of a weak Miami secondary? And then I feel like you can say the same. Can Jalen Waddle take advantage of a weak New Orleans secondary? I don't think both secondaries are that good at all. And then staying on the Dolphins, can Devon Achane continue his great season? I think he's playing like a top 5 running back this year, 900 rushing yards, on pace for over 1,000 rushing yards. Very good receiving back as well. Showing why he could be a premier player in this Dolphins offense for the future, and a reason why they didn't trade him at the trade deadline, even though there's some rumors. And then how is Tua Tagovailoa going to look against this bad Saints secondary as well? I think it's a favorable matchup for Tua. I think he should have a pretty big game. So, for that reason, I'm taking the Dolphins this week. All right, and next up, we have the Atlanta Falcons versus the New York Jets. And obviously, Michael Penix isn't playing this week. The Falcons are going to obviously be leading on Bijan Robinson this week and for the future of this team the rest of the season. So how is he going to be able to lead this offense, and is he going to be able to have a good game against a pretty good New York Jets run defense? I think this Jets run defense is one of the strong suits of this team. They do a pretty good job at limiting the opposing team's rushing attack and their top runner. And then, like I mentioned, can Kirk Cousins play a decent enough game and limit the turnovers to keep the Falcons in this game? I think if he plays a turnover-free game, there's a very good chance that the Falcons can beat most bad teams. But once you start airing the ball out and throwing interceptions and fumbling the ball, that's where you put your team at risk of losing against a team that's worse than you. And then also, I'm curious if Drake London's going to play and how he's going to play against that New York Jets secondary without Sauce Gardner now. And then going over to the Jets, can Breece Hall have another solid game? He's got to be the leader of this Jets offense now without Garrett Wilson for a couple more weeks. Justin Fields just got benched and it's Tyrod Taylor. So can Breece Hall be on pace for another 1,000-yard rushing season? Can he have a big game and be a reason why the Jets might pull off this upset? And then, like I mentioned, I'm interested to see if Drake London's going to play. I think he's one of the best receivers in the league, very underrated and playing like a top 10 receiver this year. But with taking everything into account, I'm taking the Falcons in this Week 13 matchup. All right, and next up, we have the Arizona Cardinals versus the Buccaneers. Some things I'm looking forward to seeing in this matchup is if Jacoby Brissett continue his solid season. I think he's stepped in and been really well with the absence of Kyler Murray, and that's the reason why they don't want to rush Kyler Murray back from his injury and why he's on the IR right now. And I think that he's, like I always mention, he's been incorporating Marvin Harrison and Trey McBride a lot, so I'm interested to see if Marvin Harrison's going to come back this week and if he's going to be able to involve both of them against the Tampa Bay defense. And then sitting on the Cardinals, can the Cardinals defense take advantage of all the injuries that the Bucs are dealing with? It's going to be interesting to see if Bucky Irving's going to play this week, if Baker Mayfield's going to play this week. Baker Mayfield just suffered an injury on Sunday Night Football against the Rams last week. I think he has an AC joint sprain on his non-throwing hand, so there's a good chance he could play this week. But, this Bucs team is very injury-riddled without, obviously, Mike Evans. Emeka Egbuka's had to deal with injuries earlier in the year. Chris Godwin has been playing a little bit more, but he's still probably dealing with his injury. Bucky Irving should be coming back this week as well. But I feel like the Cardinals are in a prime chance to take advantage of this injury-riddled Bucs team. And then, can this Bucs team get back on track after having some tough losses? I think they've had some tough games playing the Bills, the Rams. I'm sure I'm missing other teams, and they're on a losing streak right now. They got to get back on track fast. The Panthers are right behind the Bucs, and they're on their tail. So the Bucs need this one right here. But I just don't see it happening. I'm taking the Cardinals in this Week 13 match. All right, and next up, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars versus the Tennessee Titans. Some things I'm looking forward to seeing is if Travis Etienne can continue his good stretch of games. I feel like he started off the season very hot. Middle of the season, he cooled it down. He's getting back up the last 2 or 3 weeks. And I feel like he's been a focal point of why this team is winning. He's the focal point of the offense. And I'm very curious on this offense. Brian Thomas Jr. is finally going to play. I really want to see Brian Thomas, Parker Washington, and Jacoby Myers. I think they fit each other very well and will mesh together as a really good wide receiver trio for this team and help Trevor Lawrence succeed. And then going over to the Titans, can Cam Ward put together another solid performance? I thought he played pretty well last week. And then can this Titans team spoil the chance of the Jaguars winning the AFC South, one game back of the Colts? The Titans are obviously out of playoff contention and out of division contention as well. They could spoil the Jaguars' chance of winning. Divisional games are usually close no matter what division. So this is a toss-up game. Anyone can win. But with that being said, I'm taking the Jaguars in this Week 13 matchup. All right, next up we have the Minnesota Vikings versus the Seahawks. Some things I'm looking forward to seeing in this matchup. J.J. McCarthy can put together a good game and finally limit the turnovers against a pretty good Seattle defense. I think that J.J. McCarthy's had a rough year ever since coming back from his injury. And I think he's starting to become on a short leash, and I can very well see Kevin O'Connell be willing to pull McCarthy in the game if he's having a very bad performance again this week. I feel like the last couple of weeks he's strung together a couple bad performances, unfortunately. And every single time he targets Justin Jefferson, he always throws interceptions. I just want Justin Jefferson to be involved. He's a top 3 receiver in this league, and he hasn't been able to get up to the stats of that, which is poor quarterback play with Wentz and McCarthy. No offense to both of them. I want to see him have a big week and finally get involved. And then going over to a receiver who's playing like a top 3 receiver and very well is in those conversations right now with JSN, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. Can he have another dominant performance? Last week he cooked the Titans secondary, or is Brian Flores' defensive mind going to be able to try to scheme him out of a game and limit JSN? And then going over to Seattle's defense, can this team bury J.J. McCarthy and potentially have him bench in this game? Like I mentioned earlier, I think J.J. McCarthy's going to be on a short leash. I very well could see Kevin O'Connell pulling him if he's having another bad performance. And the quarterbacks nowadays, you don't have that long of a chance to impress your team. And I think J.J. McCarthy, when coming out, was a very developmental quarterback. And Kevin O'Connell usually gets the best out of his quarterbacks, but it's almost been 2 years now. I know he didn't get to play his first year with his injury. He hasn't gotten better throughout the season, and I very well could see them pulling the plug on it and maybe drafting a quarterback this year in the draft. But with taking everything into account, I'm picking the Seahawks this week. All right, next up we have the Raiders versus the Chargers. Some things I'm looking forward to seeing this matchup is how is this Raiders offense going to look with new interim offensive coordinator. Obviously, the big news coming out of Las Vegas this week is Chip Kelly being fired. If I'm not mistaken, I think he was the highest paid coordinator in the league, which the results aren't showing. That's probably a big reason why he got fired. And it just sucks because I feel like the Raiders can't hire the right position coaches and maybe the head coach. It's too early to say that about Pete Carroll. He's shown that he can produce a good team. I just don't think he has the talent on it this year. but I'm curious how this offense is going to look. And then staying on the Raiders, going over to the defense, can Max Crosby take advantage of an injured Chargers O-line? I mentioned every week that Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater are out. Max Crosby has a very favorable matchup, and if he can wreck the game and get Justin Herbert pressured, there's a very good chance they could pull off the upset in this matchup. And then going over to the Chargers, I'm curious how they're going to look coming off bye. If I'm not mistaken, they got embarrassed against the Jaguars before they went on bye. I think they're ready to come out and right the ship. And then I'm curious if Amari Hampton's going to play this week. I think he's a very big point of this offense. Drafted first round in the most recent draft. And I think Kamani Vidal just stepped in and been very well in the absence of Hampton. This is Hampton's backfield. And I think he could very well be a premier running back in this league. And then going over the Chargers defense, can they force Geno Smith into some turnovers? Geno Smith finally doesn't have more interceptions than touchdowns. But nonetheless, Geno Smith has been very prone to turnover-worthy plays and just turnovers altogether. And that's a big reason why that the Raiders aren't that good this season. But with taking everything into account, I'm taking the Chargers in this Week 13 matchup. All right, next up, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers versus the Buffalo Bills. Some things I'm looking forward to seeing in this matchup. If this Bills team can get back on track against a bad Steelers team, can Josh Allen get back to playing at an MVP level? I feel like the past couple of weeks he hasn't been his own, just like how Lamar Jackson has been. And I think the Bills are obviously still a top team in the AFC, but they're looking to prove it. And then over the past couple of weeks, I feel like James Cook has been the one stepping up in this Buffalo offense. Can he have another big week against this Steelers defense? I think certain weeks the Steelers defense is good and other weeks it doesn't look good. So I bet you the Bills are probably hoping that this is a week that they don't look consistently good and James Cook can potentially break a run or two. And then going over to the Steelers, I just saw before I started filming that Aaron Rodgers should be playing this week, but if he is, how well is he going to look with his fractured wrist? I know it's on his non-throwing hand, I want to say as well, just like how Baker Mayfield's injury is as well. But I'm interested to see how he looks against this Bills defense. And then can this Steelers offense get DK Metcalf more involved? I feel like they're not using him at all. They traded a second-round pick for him and paid him $30 million plus per year like a top 5 receiver. They don't throw him the ball at all. They don't involve him, and they just don't know how to use him. It's just sad to see. I bet a lot of Steelers fans aren't happy with how well George Pickens is playing and how well DK Metcalf's playing. It seems like they downgraded at receiver, gave up a second-round pick, and paid him $30 million, and they're probably not too happy with the result. But with taking everything into account, I'm taking the Bills in this Week 13 matchup. All right, our Sunday Night Football matchup, we have the Broncos versus the Commanders. I'm looking forward to seeing this matchup is if the Broncos can continue their good season. I think they're 9-2, top team in the AFC West. And can they put this AFC West out of reach and not let the Chiefs claw back into it? And then also, can Bo Nix take advantage of a bad Washington secondary? Like I mentioned, with my Week 13 start of the week for fantasy football, I have Courtland Sutton. I think that the Broncos are in line to have a big offensive performance this week. And I like the Broncos' chances that Bo Nix having a big week and potentially being the breakout week that we've been looking for. And then going over to Washington, can this secondary limit this Broncos passing attack? I think when it's on, the Broncos passing attack is one of the better passing attacks in the league, but it's very inconsistent. The Broncos go stretches at times where their passing offense is not up to par. And then I'm just very curious to see. It looks like Jaden Daniels isn't playing this week, so how's Marcus Mariota going to be able to play? And is he going to be able to pull off the upset against the Broncos? And then also, is Terry McLaurin going to finally play? Very injury-riddled season for the Commanders. I think they're in line to have a big bounce-back year next year. But with taking everything into account, I'm taking the Broncos in this Week 13 matchup on Sunday Night Football. All right, and then our last matchup, Monday Night Football. For Week 13, we have the Giants versus the Patriots. I'm curious to see if Jackson Dart's finally going to play after being in concussion protocol for the past 2 weeks, if I'm not mistaken. And can this Giants offense continue to look pretty good against good defenses? I thought they looked pretty good against the Lions defense last week, and they've looked pretty good against the Eagles defense at times this year as well. I think they're a team that's very young and has a very good potential in this league in the next couple of years. And then going over to the Patriots, is this Patriots team going to be able to take care of business, or can the Giants pull off the upset? And the Patriots are playing like a top team in the AFC. And then also, can this Patriots defense make it rough for Jackson Dart in his first game back? I think Jackson Dart's flashed that he could very easily be a top 5, top 10 quarterback in this league. But he's come back from his concussion protocol. He's been injured a lot this season, taking a lot of hits. Can this Patriots team impose some tough hits against him and impose some pressure and make him have a tough first game back after coming back from injury again? But with taking everything into account, I'm taking the Patriots in this Week 13 matchup. All right, guys, and that wraps up our Week 13 game picks for each game. Like I always mention, it's crazy how fast the season's been going. We're already in Week 13, next Week 14. I'm very thankful for your guys' support. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone. And like I always mention at the end of every episode, make sure you guys are entering this giveaway. It's a very real giveaway. It's the easiest one you guys can enter. Just and subscribe and just comment on each video. The more you comment, the better chance you have. And at the end of the year, I'm going to pick my giveaway winner. It's up to $125 right now. It's only going to go up throughout the season. And with that being said, I'll see you guys next week for my Week 14 game predictions. Have a happy Thanksgiving, guys.